But if we talk about maybe like why biologically the myelin,
myelin, myelin sheath.
why neurons can communicate so easily. I don't know. I don't want to overcome.
It's okay. I didn't prepare that.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Park James Hotel. We're really glad you're here. We're especially glad to you all because you weathered the weather. And so we're grateful that you did the drive in the midst of the atmospheric river. The Park James Hotel is a boutique hotel, 62 rooms in the heart of Menlo Park. And we're really honored to have you here. Next week, we are going to have one of the best astronomers in the world. And he's going to talk about the parade of planets that's happening right now. If you saw the movie Contact, his teacher was the woman played by Jodie Foster in that film. And we're going to actually use our TV screen back here, and we're going to show you Jupiter and Mercury and Venus and everything that's going on in the cosmos. Also, if you're around and you have absolutely nothing to do on Valentine's Day, join us here at Valentine's Day. We're having an amazing pre-course prefixed meal. All right, listen, we're about to start the show. And two things. One, Nick is going to say in his introduction, whose phone is that? Is that John? By the way, everyone, can we give John a round of applause? He bought all the food for us tonight.
Hey, John!
Yes. So Nick's going to say from the Bay, and you guys are going to say and beyond. Let's practice that. From the Bay.
And beyond!
All right, that's going to happen. Lastly, on March 6th, we're going to have our 2-year anniversary show. And that 2-year anniversary show is going to be with the government of Mongolia. And we're going to have contortionists and musicians. So we'd love to see you all on March 6th. All right, Nick, it's all you. Yes. Do you have a mic?
All right, great. And I think we're live, huh? All right, who's ready to roll? All right, everybody, welcome to Silicon Zombies, where we bring you the best brains from the Bay and beyond. Pretty jazzed today, especially we've got 3 specialists specifically around the brain. I'm talking 86 billion neurons, and they're all firing off. They're controlling our emotions. They're controlling our wants and our needs and our desires and how we connect as humans. So before we get any further, I want to give a shout out to my main man, Huma Khalili, and the beautiful Park James Hotel. Round of applause to these guys. And also to our sponsors at Necodex. So if you're building a product and you need some outsourced help, these guys do a wonderful job. They've done a great job for our community. That's NECODEX.com, Necodex, for building and developing products. So before we get any further, also want to do a shout out to our amazing guests here. So we've got Cindy Reynolds, Dr. Bella Sarkis, and Kevin Blakley. Round of applause for these guys. And we've got a really unique, multifaceted approach at understanding the brain. So with I guess we'll kind of get this thing kicked off. Maybe Kevin, would you like to do a quick introduction on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Kevin Blakley, and I'm a keynote speaker and consultant, and I particularly focus on helping companies maintain their creative edge. We don't want to be one of those late-stage companies that just falls off into oblivion and lets that next invention go by. So my job is to assess what their problems are and then figure out how we can make it better for them. So, yeah.
My name is Arbella Sarkis. I'm a family physician. I've been in practice for more than 30 years. I'm in Los Gatos, California. I've been forced to learn more and more about dementia because of my mom. And it breaks my heart to see that this disease is growing very fast. And everybody scratched their head, what's going on? What is happening? Why people, younger generation, we had cases of age 30 and getting problem with dementia, and mostly is about fog, brain fog, and so forth. Anyways, I love it. As I said, because of my mom, I forced to learn more and more. And I'm very excited tonight to share my experience and what we can do to prevent. Because baby boomers here, we are going to have dementia, like it or not. Minor, maximum, minor, whatever. So we want to prevent that and live a lifelong, happy life. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Cindy Reynolds, and I am a neuroscientist and a certified QEEG technologist. I've been studying the brain for over 16 years and opened my company NeuroFit 12 years, 14 years ago, and just a few years ago, NeuroFit merged at Jizen to merge neuroscience and functional medicine. So we are a great collaborative team, and my goal is to not only read the electrical activity of the brain, but to also help customers and clients to find answers, because it took us over 7 years to identify my daughter's mild traumatic brain injury. And I swore if I could shave any time off of any other family, then everything we went through was worth it.
Well, let's start with you, Cindy. What is brain mapping, and how exactly do you guys execute this at Jizen?
So brain mapping, or QEEG, quantitative electroencephalography, is a neuroimaging technique to analyze brainwave activity. And so the purpose of it is to identify regions of the brain where brain function is dysregulated. And most importantly, it gets to the source of whatever presenting symptoms you might be experiencing. So you might ask, how do you do that? And we put 19 electrodes on your scalp that's connected to an amplifier and a computer. And 10 minutes of eyes open and 10 minutes of eyes closed data is recorded and digitized. The recorded data of the actual raw EEG, I can now look at it on my computer and look to see where the brain waves are irregular or where there might be transient anomalies that can become presenting symptoms. And most importantly, with the digitized data, we then generate QEEG brain maps that give us a graphic look at the amplitude, the frequency, and the z-scores, or comparisons to a normative database. And with that information, we can do three things. One is look at the electrical activity and determine where there's too much electrical activity, or where it's 2 to 3 standard deviations above the norm, or where there's not enough electrical activity, so it's 2 to 3 standard deviations below the norm, or where there's a balanced amount of electrical activity. And then we can also look at network connections, and we can determine where networks are offline. That's often due to axonal shearing, where the myelin sheath has been severed, or the protective coating around the neurons. We can tell whether it's offline or hypocoherent, or where it's locked up in a compensatory state that's called hypocoherent. Or we can determine where the brainwave activity and the brain information flow is operating optimally.
Thank you. Kevin, let's approach the brain a different way. Tell us about creativity, and why do so many artists seem to have manic highs and manic lows?
Yeah, kind of how I like to visualize the brain. I come from more of an art and engineering background, so they're the experts on what the neurons are actually doing, and I just kind of try to paint a metaphor on how we can visualize that happening. The metaphor I really like is the snow-covered hilltop. When you're a child, your brain is this hill that is covered with perfectly coated with powder or snow. And every thought you have, everything you do is like carving a channel down that. And as you have the same thought over and over and over again, you're carving that out deeper and deeper and deeper. These are those neurons becoming stronger connected and more hard linked there. Think of that muscle memory. Every basketball free throw you take, it's getting more and more connected. But if you're also telling yourself like, oh, I'm such an idiot, or oh, I'm such a dumb person for thinking that, that's also getting reconnected more and more. So that's kind of how I like to map out the brain. Those channels get so carved down that we can never really get out of the way we're meant to be thinking in that. As far as creativity goes, I like to define creativity as the breaking of the expected neural network pathway in a way that is deemed to be good by other people. So those neural network pathways are how our neurons are linked together. We need to get out of that pathway somewhere else, and someone has to tell us that's good. This is why artists are so manic depressive, because by definition, their value can never come from within. It always has to be externally validated. I do something different. I create a painting or something like that, and someone else has to tell me that it's good. Someone else has to value my worth. So that's why artists are always having this manic struggle of self-worth and everything.
It's awesome. I guess they have to put themselves out there, which is part of the creative process. Dr. Sarkis, it seems that more and more folks are getting dementia younger and younger, and maybe this is happening with some other cognitive diseases as well. What's behind this?
So my job is, unfortunately, treat patients with already damaged the neurons. Unfortunately, we are all exposed to multitude of environmental toxins, you name it, and aging, genes, predisposition to that. But regardless of anything that can cause damage and degeneration of neurons is when the dementia starts. Dementia has a variety of reasons and causes. It could be from plain brain injury, could be from vascular after they had stroke, could be from Parkinson's disease, Hodgkin's disease, multiple myeloma, MS, and et cetera, et cetera. But presently what we are dealing with is a senile dementia, but we are seeing it mostly in a younger population. And the sad things that also we are finding is that we have patients at a much younger age with so-called frontal temporal dementia, which is very, very hard to treat. They do not respond to the conventional treatment that presently all the primary care psychiatrists or neurologists they deal with. And these are the resistant ones that nothing can break through. And if you ask, what is that caused by? It's caused by inflammation of the neurons. Where this inflammation is coming? From environment, from food, from hormones, from stress, from aging, genes, predisposition, and all that causes to increase a protein in our body called galactine-3. Galactine-3, it is a natural protein that we produce in our body to regulate cell to cell, cells to matrix, and regulates inflammation in our body. When this is out of control for whatever reason is, and yet we don't know much 100% about it, but we know many things that it can cause that inflammation, it starts to produce more and more galactine-3. Galactine-3, unfortunately, when it's too much in our body, which we can calculate that in serum and in the urine, it damages the brain cells called macroglia, a chronic inflammation and degeneration of macroglia like joints. It causes neurodegeneration. And that, unfortunately, causes dementia. Now, until most recent one, everybody was, thinking about beta amyloid plaques. The most recent treatment that we have, unfortunately, it showed it was wrong way to go. And in this case, that this medication, even though they digest these beta amyloid plaques, they are literally plaques in the brain, patient, they didn't have much of improvement in their memory. But they also noticed that treatment that newly is available to us, thank God, it's going after galactine-3. Galactine-3 blocking this protein and going after what the damage was caused by galectin-3, not only in the brain, but in all our body, from kidney, liver, lungs, guts, you name it, A to Z, is going to affect our body. So by blocking this protein or avoiding to produce more or destroying them, memory comes back and patient has much, much better life expectancy,
Dr.
chances.
Sarkis, inflammation isn't always bad, though. It can be like a
Yes.
leading indicator of sorts, right?
Yes. So all inflammation, besides in the brain, causes degeneration, causes cancer. So accidentally, my third patient had multiple myeloma. I didn't know anything about causing, improving even cancer. So like you just said, thank you for your question. I treated him for dementia. He came back to my office after 1 month and he said, Dr. Sarkis, something happened with your treatment. Of course, I was biting my hands. I said, oh, shit, he's going to say something bad now. I said, what happened? He said, something strange. My treatment by Stanford was missed many times. They didn't find the right treatment for my multiple myeloma. My last one that they did, they were doing a blood test for blood cancer markers. Nothing will change. Months after months, this gentleman, he was going to do blood tests. Nothing moved, nothing decreased, nothing. I didn't know. I treated him for just dementia. And after 1 month, he came back. They did the blood test for him. The cancer marker went down to 50%. So this is the beauty of this treatment that we have approved by FDA in June of 2023. The headquarters is located in Foster City. I was the first doctor to go there when I heard, because of my mother having dementia, went there, looked at the facility. It's amazing, so sophisticated. And I tried to treat my mom as a first patient. But patient after patient with Parkinson disease, this is amazing. My Parkinson patients with dementia, they came for dementia, but then halfway through the IV treatment, their speech turns normal. And when they leave, the gaits came much better. And after treatment, one of my patients, Richard, no more tremor. He's a big-time golf player. And he comes every month, beside for dementia, because he's freaking out not to get demented. He's high businessman. And he doesn't want to get stiff. So multiple benefits.
Cindy, when you do brain mapping, because I did brain mapping with you, and you see markers that are like indicators of inflammation, what's your protocol in terms of bringing balance back to the brain?
So with inflammation is how I merged with Dr. Beth McDougall, because 14 years ago, I would try to train those patterns in the brain, which is usually too much fast wave activity, because when there's inflammation, the immune system kicks in and sets off the neurotransmitter glutamate, which is an excitatory neurotransmitter. Once it crosses the blood-brain barrier, it has a diffuse pattern across the brain, whereas normally we see focused patterns. So I would still try to attenuate it, and it wouldn't budge, and I knew there was something biomedical going on. So that's when I would send them to Dr. Beth to get blood work. Lyme, mold, Epstein-Barr, it was just 100%. And so they would go through protocols with Dr. Beth, and then I could do subsequent brain maps to ensure that the Lyme or mold is being removed.
Okay.
I joke that I used to have to send them down the highway. Now I send them across the hallway.
Kevin, let's go back to you here for a second. So let's talk about the brain. How does it generate ideas? And ever since the pandemic, are you noticing it's harder to get people to be as creative as they used to be?
I kind of look at that from what kills creativity, and fear is one of the biggest things that will just shut it down immediately. We go into fight or flight. We try to think of things that have kept us safe in the past, and we stay on those lines. We don't want to divert from that. We're just staying alive. So I think people have gotten way more afraid to stick their neck out in these day and age. And unfortunately, that's something that we just have to do when it comes to being creative. As far as where ideas come from, that's kind of the big mystery that everyone's trying to think about. I think creative people are more those like ADD types that just the walls of those snow caves that they're walking through are just a little bit more sloped, and they're able to pull themselves out of one side of the brain to the other side of the brain. So something along those lines. But in ancient Greece, they also had a thought that there was like a daemon or a genie, and those words originally meant there was some figurative thing that spoke wisdom to them. Socrates thought he had something that would speak to him from afar. And so that's kind of how they built up barriers between them and the risks of being creative. It wasn't your idea. Some figurative thing was giving you this information. So that was kind of the psychological barrier that they had back then. And thinking about now, COVID's just kind of got us all in our bubbles and not really getting out there and talking too much. So that's a big part that we need to bring back for it.
You know, to stay on this thread of creativity, I almost feel like maybe eventually we're going to get into this place where we're open to using psychedelics to unlock this. Or I don't know if you have any particular feeling of what this looks like, or maybe just kind of understanding our sleep schedules. Like Einstein, towards the end of his life, was sleeping half an hour on, half an hour off, because there was this moment in between this kind of waking life where he didn't really truly know where he was, and those worlds would intertwine. So what are your thoughts on it?
You know, I don't have any personal experience with that, but
is that because we're live?
No. But so as far as psychedelics go, what I've heard is that it's kind of like a fresh coat of powder falls on top of your snow hill, and you kind of have a little bit more wiggle room to get out of those trains of thoughts that you're in. Your neurons are a little less connected, and then also people use it to kind of talk to God or see the wisdom from afar. So you go on this trip, but if you do too much, you might not come back, and that's another thing. But I'll let the medical experts tell us what's actually happening in those situations.
Sure. Yes. Cindy, did you want to speak to that? I mean, obviously alcohol, it does pass that blood-brain barrier. But traditionally, any of these kind of psychotropics, they're connecting to neurotransmitters. How does this work?
Well, I've done like pre and post cerebral lysin, pre and post drugs, and there's a lot of different ones now. And what I found is a lot of times it will use a lot of the neurotransmitters. And if your brain is in a dysregulated state going in, like especially if you're already in fight or flight, that can cause a panic attack or not a good experience. So, and I did the pre and posts, and 100% somebody who had patterns for fight or flight mechanism going in, they did not have a good experience. So I think it's important to look at the brain you're treating.
By fight or flight, would you mean like kind of like a PTSD response or something?
So when I look at brain maps, the first region that I go and look to is the autonomic nervous system. And I look at the neural connections in the subcortical and cortical connections to the amygdala and hippocampus. And when they're locked on or in a hypercoherent state, that's how the brain goes into fight or flight. And I can tell if somebody had a traumatic birth or if they had a traumatic childhood, because the brain stays locked in this state. And then we can use neurotechnology using a vagal reset to unlock that fight or flight mechanism and turn it off. So people going into a psychedelic experience like that's pretty much what I've experienced.
All right, we're going to open it up to the audience here soon, but you guys could have gone into any industry you wanted. And I'd love to hear from each of you how you ended up in this field. We'll just go right down the row here. So Cindy, let's start with you. Why did you choose to end up in this industry?
That's a loaded question. When my daughter was 4 years old, she walked in front of a kid at the height of his swing on the playground, and he kicked her on the side of the head and knocked her unconscious for 7 hours at 4 years old. And they didn't know much about head injury then. She wasn't throwing up. So they said she's fine. 7 hours later, she woke up. All intents and purposes, she was fine. She went on to be an Olympic gymnast on the USA rhythmic gymnastics team, dancer choreographer in New York, or choreography at Madison Square Garden in the US Open, fashion designer at FIT. But your brain's not fully developed till you're 25. So 21, 22, one glass of wine, we'd go, what's wrong with our daughter? And we had her tested, and she was diagnosed bipolar and put on all sorts of meds that just made it worse. And luckily that was right when rehab centers became dual diagnosis. And I thought, well, let's have a team of doctors find out the right meds. And they called us in and they go, she's not bipolar. And I get goosebumps every time I say this because it changed the course of my life. And I'm like, what do you mean? I just spent thousands of dollars to find out she's bipolar. And they're like, no, she has problems processing information. Did she ever hit her head? Like, yeah, and then plus subsequent injuries as well. So I was 20 plus years in computer science, traveled all over the country, interviewed the top neuroscientists, found a program, put her in it, and it worked. And so my goal was to find out how you heal a mild traumatic brain injury without medication. And because it worked and it changed our life, I sold my Silicon stock and opened NeuroFit to help other families. And what happens in it's a misnomer that you have to have a concussion to have a head injury. Acceleration, deceleration, because the brain's really sharp and the brain can bounce against the skull. The skull is really sharp and it will tear the long connecting fibers in the neurons. It's called axonal shearing. And then the brain goes into a low voltage state. The mitochondria don't generate fuel or ATP. And that presentation on a brain map is what we find quite often. And then we have specific technology to activate neuroplasticity like VASPER and V-Light and Neurofield.
Dr. Arbella, how did you end up in this industry?
Well, I was 5 years old when I discovered I want to be a doctor. So, and that was, I always played as a doctor. I forced my cousins to play doctor with me. Anyways, make long story short. And I really had passion for medicine and compassion for patients, mostly elderly people. When they get old, we get really short with them. And how sad it is. One time they've been the one that to care for us, and then now we have no, fuse for the short fuse, and we don't have much patience. And I saw it with my sweetest patient in my practice, non-responding on treatment for days and years and decades, nothing. They are really becoming vegetable. And seeing that this medication, when I treated them, to be able to bring him back to perfect normal lifestyle. I had, we do mini mental tests, and one of the easiest one that we use is the score should be 30 out of 30, which probably all of us, we will get to that. But I had patient with number 8, number 13, number 15, being able to bring him back to 30 out of 30, being able to get up and prepare breakfast, traveling, and calculating how much the husband put the tip on a restaurant bill. Hello, how a 90-year-old can do that? The only way we could get and reach, thank God for this new medication that is in the market, that is approved by FDA, to be used for compassionate use, and it's not just for dementia. We are seeing patients with Parkinson, walking, talking, no much tremor, as well as patient with cancer, patient with asthma, to go down to a quarter of what they were using before. I'm saving money for the government too. It's not for that. It's not for money, but to see them getting up and like my mom wearing her red suit after 1 month of treatment, going and visiting my brother who was homebound. How you can get that?
Just real quickly,
That is
can you
what
tell
makes
us
me
what
happy.
the treatment is and the science behind it? Maybe high
Yeah.
level of what the science looks like.
So TB006 does not have a name yet because it's under investigational treatment. It's the safest among all these treatments presently available in the market. They've been removed because none of them really showed scientific and with the patient improvement with their dementia. What they do is just dissolve the beta amyloid plaques, which is not the case of dementia. Dementia is different. It's caused by galactin-3. So this medication goes after galactin-3. It's a humanized monoclonal antibody anti-galactin-3. Please, when you go home, check it out because galactin-3 causes multitude of diseases, including cancer. That's why it's working with my patient with multiple myeloma without me knowing anything about it. And I get surprised with those every day when I see other diseases getting better. So medication is tailored to reverse or improve dementia, all kind of dementia. The worst, vascular and frontal temporal, there is no treatment for it. And they decline really bad and fast.
Thank you. Kevin, how'd you get into this industry?
So it was kind of out of survival. So when I was 14 months old, I was diagnosed with bilateral retinoblastoma. And for those that don't know, that's a relatively common childhood cancer that's in the back of both of your retinas on your eyes. And I was treated with radiation therapy, which is basically what it sounds like. You're shooting beams in the back of a small child's head. And it's very good at killing the cancer, but it kills everything else that's around it. And my left temporal lobe was right by where this most severe cancer was. And so growing up, always had learning difficulties, memorization, learning new words. The English language, having its spelling rules is very frustrating. But some point in time, math clicked to me, and I went off to my mechanical engineering degree. And at that point, I had a class where the professor would not allow us to have a cheat sheet on this thing. And so flashcards are useless for me. And I have a whole page of equations that I need for this test. And I'm trying to think of what am I going to do to actually get this down? And I wrote all the equations out. And then I flipped the page over, and then I wrote all the equations out again. And then I flipped the page over, and I wrote all the equations out again. And I did that about 50 times before I could write all the equations down without looking at the page that I originally had for it. And if you asked me to tell you what was on the page, I could not have done it. But I was able to write it all down on the back of the test before I started taking it and figure it out from there. And that's when I was like, okay, there's something with like my neurons don't work in that specific way, but I can find a way around it. And that's the same thing with organizations where we have different ways of thinking with each and every person. We just need to find the best way of optimizing that. And that's how we really can generate a lot of creative ideas within our groups and our corporations. So.
All right.
I got one real quick.
Yes, here we go.
Sorry, this is just too fascinating. So it's interesting how computer chip fabrication is kind of loosely based on the brain and neural networks. So for example, in the brain, the myelin, did I get that right? Myelin, okay. Myelin, that was close. So these neurons are able to talk to each other much more easily. In a similar way, like Jensen Huang, what they're doing with NVIDIA, these two chips are connected and they're able to transfer a terabyte of data per second back and forth from each other. I'm curious, how are you thinking about creativity in a similar way to create the environment for easier technology or information transfer?
Yeah, and I think that's a great model for it, but we need to think of ourselves as the neurons and those communication points. So if one person has 5 ideas about something, maybe one of them will be good. The dirty secret is most ideas are just terrible ideas, but you got to go through all the bad ones before you get to that one great idea. But if you have 100 people all coming up with 5 ideas, then that's something powerful. There's a better chance of having something within that. And if we can communicate back and forth freely without judgment or fear of, it's a bad idea, I'm going to be shamed for that, that's when like a lot of creative ideas can really generate really quickly. So we need to have that free exchange back and forth. A lot of them are going to be shit, but that's just how it is. And then eventually we'll get to that good one. But the communication is
Got to
key.
kiss a lot of frogs, right?
Exactly.
All right, we want to open it up. Does anyone? Yes, sir. Our first question.
Can you introduce yourself too?
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
My name is Tim Schultz. I was just curious when Cindy mentioned EEG earlier and what you look for as a neuroscientist. So the hospital I work for, neurologists, they frequently order EEGs. One neurologist in particular orders an EEG for every patient that needs a neurology consultation. Mm-hmm. When the neurologists order EEGs in a hospital, are they looking for different things that you're looking for as a neuroscientist? And then the second part is, could we adapt your model to hospitals across the country so that neurologists and hospitals could look for the same thing that you look for in your EEG tests?
Absolutely. And yes, we're looking at the same thing when we look at the raw data. We're looking for transients, for epileptiforms, for anything that could signal some sort of dysregulation or the cause of presenting symptoms. That takes a very skilled mindset to be able to read that raw data. That's why that's very up the neurologist's field. But also the QEEG graphic interfaces and the connections to how we find the source of whatever presenting symptoms are, not just in the raw EEG, but in the actual network connections themselves, either where they're not connected because there's been an older head injury. And when there's older head injuries, it's an invisible disability, just like my daughter had. But with QEEGs, we can see the injury. We can tell that it's there, and we can then use neurotechnology to target it and regulate it and activate neuroplasticity. To answer your question, yes, QEEGs would be absolutely beneficial in hospitals environments. And I have many colleagues who are neurologists, but there's not many around that do QEEGs right now.
Next question's back here.
Hi, this is so exciting because I actually had the chance to study human behavioral biology at Stanford and TA for Dr. Robert Sapolsky, which I'm sure that you're aware of. Dr. Robert Sapolsky, who wrote the book Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers, talking about stress and the human brain and how that, the reason why zebras don't get ulcers is because they just turn on their stress response when they're being chased, and they turn it off when the stressor goes away, the lion, and then they start grazing. And our problem is that we don't, and we activate it all the time indiscriminately, right? So you're talking about the world of adrenaline and the brain. And what I want to ask you is this. There's also necessities of mother invention, right? So a lot of us are positioned where we are in society because of our adrenalized state. That is allowing us to achieve a certain level of achievement in this society, right? At a certain function of adrenal, right? So that's one aspect of, have you tested the same person in for example, like, can you induce a more GABAergic state in the same person, perhaps listening to their favorite music around their family, drinking a glass of their favorite wine? Have you retested the QEEG? Is it receptive to behavioral change? That's the number one thing that I'd like to ask you right now.
Does anyone have an answer for that?
Are you asking me?
Any one of you?
Do you want to? I can answer that in that what we're looking for when I talk about adrenals and that sort of, we're looking at trauma. So trauma is something that nobody really wants to live with on a daily basis. It's an underlying sense of angst that's always there. That doesn't mean you're not going to have stress, and you're not going to have difficult situations in your life. But what clients report when we do a vagal reset is that their underlying sense of calm that wasn't there before, then to now go ahead and manage all the daily life stressors, and their adrenals can activate and calm down, and there's more flexibility to deal with those sort of things.
And from an artistic perspective, though, I think from the heightened state, most of our great ideas come when we're in a relaxed state of being, and it comes down to we've all have our great ideas in the shower, right? Steve Jobs famously would go for walks and talk to people, and that's where he would have those amazing ideas for the future. And so, getting into that relaxed state is important, and every artist has their own process, and that's what it's coming about: is how do I get into that state where the creation can actually come from as well.
All right, the next question's here.
Hi there. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay, great. My name is Rosie Williams. So last fall, I was diagnosed with idiopathic intracranial hypertension. And all of my doctors have been stumped as to how and why that happened. It was interesting going through the process because it was relatively recently, that it took a really long time for people to really identify that this was even a brain issue. So I'm really curious, as you guys are talking about sort of the brain is like the headquarters of the body. And oftentimes it's almost like the last resort. Like, it's almost like you have to check everything else, do the blood work, do all these other tests to identify that it's actually a brain issue. And so I'm really curious about sort of how you think about not just the brain, but the brain within the body, and sort of what the journey has been like for you as doctors or neuroscientists, or sort of thinking about the brain within this context. About how it lives within the body and its relationship with the body as well. Thank you.
Well, as a physician, I believe, and I do functional medicine. A lot of brain damage or intracranial hypertension or any other diseases, we are going after inflammation. There are some markers. I don't know, most regular doctors, even the scientists, if they are not in functional medicine field, they don't know how to order certain tests. I believe you must be checked for CRP, for CRPHS, for homocysteine, for all these variety of labs, because they are all markers for inflammation, even galactin-3. And knowing what is wrong with you, going after what is the source of your diet, living habit, or anything like that, food allergies, molds, you name it, is virus, many times Epstein-Barr to, cytomegalovirus. There are a lot of causes that it caused you to have what you have. So I don't know, where are you living? I will be very happy to see you, because that's very interesting, and help you out at least for free. Just to tell you what to do. Go with your doctors and you just say, would you be kind to order this for me? And we will be very happy to help you with that, because it's sad to see younger people coming up with the most unheard diseases, which we even know where to start with, to look for. But I think as a physician, I see all our diseases, from rheumatoid arthritis, cancer, you name it, A to Z, is caused by inflammation. And that is environment, diet, plastic, you name it, never ends. But at least we can do a baseline for you. I will give you my business card. Come and see me.
And by the way, all the doctors are going to be available afterwards. So if we don't get to your question, you can go to them. Our next question's here.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dhaval Shah. I'm a Stanford alumni working in computer science and MLAI. I had a question about the autoimmune diseases, right? Like terminal ones like motor neuron disease and non-terminal ones like Guillain-Barré syndrome. So the treatment you talk about, how does it relate to autoimmune problems with myelin sheath having been taken out by the autoimmune attack?
Right. Even brain is autoimmune disease. Now we have to go after the triggering factors, what it is. Galectin-3 is a marker for inflammation, and inflammation comes from autoimmune diseases. So any kind, as we know, galectin-3 is in our body to regulate, but when something happens due to virus, diet, environment, plastic, as I said, anything, it triggers to produce more galectin-3 to protect us. But that protection, sometimes when it goes out of control, it causes damage. I don't know exactly what kind of autoimmune diseases you are asking, but to my knowledge, from psoriasis, RA, rheumatoid, any kind, it still goes back to inflammation. So we have to stop inflammation. Now we have to look where this inflammation is coming from. Definitely diet, stress, not sleeping, not exercising, diseases, medications. We know a lot of things. And I really don't know exactly what kind of autoimmune you are talking about. Oh, Guillain-Barré. Oh, yeah. That is virus. That is, again, is a damage of the brain post flu, and that is some people. I had one Indian patient, poor guy, he came for a visit, got Guillain-Barré disease and ended up in nursing home. He stayed in America in nursing home because he never recovered. And the treatment is steroids to suppress the inflammation. In his case, I don't know at that time if he had other diseases, more other diseases you have like diabetes, things will get worse. So you have to go after secondary causes as well.
Let's go over here.
Hi, my name is Melinda Yormick. I'm founder of a company called Clara, and we are building first of its kind hospital operation technology. So I'm really interested in this conversation, so inspired by all of you. Wanted to ask about the perspective of creativity and how we bring this conversation into the workplace, as you were mentioning, Kevin. So I do happen to think of myself as a creative, and also spent 12 years in hospital bedside and leadership as well. And knowing that I have more of that circular type thinking, that I get to be able to access that as I move into entrepreneurship, but also recognizing that I'm going to be running a company where you need to know what your productivity is going to be, how much time you allow people to engage in different ways. And so I'm curious how you approach that when you're talking to different organizations to help them tease out the creative problem solving or innovation, if you will.
Yeah, you want the right number of manic artists on your team, basically. Too many and everyone's going to start running in the wrong directions. But I approach it more from a kind of a diagnostic perspective, right? I'm an engineer by degree. I want to get to the bottom of like, what's going wrong right now? Are you not generating ideas? Are the ideas not moving forward? And so I start out with an assessment that I have everyone in the organization take. And it's kind of my baseline on, are ideas moving around, and where is the roadblock getting to the point? And then in my workshops and keynotes, I talk a lot about how our thoughts work, and then I show people how they think differently. Like, I have a question for everyone, actually. When you guys are reading, do you see the words on the page and then the images just immediately come up to your brain? Like, raise your hand if you're one of those people that just sees the words and then it immediately pops up. Okay. And so then how about you guys see the words on the page, you say the word in your head, and then the meaning is just grasped from that. Do you guys, some of you guys think that way? So I'd venture you guys are the slower reading group, but that's okay. I'm one of you guys as well. And so that's just a quick little demonstration. There's an extra step that some of us are taking when we're gathering information off of the words right there. So I explain what diversity really is, and it's everything in our heads. Our brains are mapped out completely differently. And by understanding that, they don't get so offended when someone disagrees with them in the organization. And I think that's the big part of it. Like, I have an idea, I think it'll work. I have the courage to say the idea to my boss, knowing that my boss very likely will reject the idea because most ideas are just bad ideas. But I've done my job by presenting the idea to him or her, and that's what has to happen. And if, as a creative person yourself, I'm sure you've had the managers in the past that are like completely shutting down everything, and then eventually you get to the point where you're discouraged, you feel like your juices aren't really being floated for the creative side of you, and then you get frustrated, you shut down, and then you start looking for the door, basically. And that's another thing that I do, is try to identify, these are your creatives, these are the ones that are frustrated. We need to make sure that they're organized right. There's a good book called, I think it's Zone to Win, is it? And it's kind of about how to manage the corporations as they grow so large. You still want to maintain that creative edge within your organization. And it talks about kind of segmenting the creatives and putting them off into a corner where they can do their mad science stuff, and then you reap the rewards from that too. So another good book.
All right, we have time for 3 more questions. All 3 of the people already picked. I'm sorry. But let's try to truncate your answers, guys.
Thank you very much. My name is Gary Schwartz. I am with a company that has produced a first of its kind revolutionary medical food product for the treatment of depression. And what we have found over 30 to 40 years is that most people who have and suffer from depression and other anxiety disorders, unmet nutritional needs in their brain. What my question to you is, what have you found through your own research, your studies, in terms of treating people with mental illness or whatever, in terms of efficacy and protocols that work for helping these people? And the doctor has already explained some of them. Thank you.
So, depressed people, they lack serotonin hormone. Coming from a functional medicine, fortunately, for every problem that I see in my patient, I have a handout. I have a list of food that if you eat those will increase naturally your serotonin. Definitely diet is a big role in all autoimmune diseases, dementia, even psychiatric problems, because it has to do with producing hormones that we need to make us happy, depressed, or what. So nutrition is big role. But then food allergy is another problem that unfortunately we are dealing with now with the younger generation. I feel so bad every time I write medicine for ADD. Actually, before I left to come here, I had new patient with the ADD. It's only 35-year-old, but this guy is literally non-functional. And I know he has problem with his guts, with his diet. Nutrition, I absolutely 100% I agree with you, is a baseline of all the diseases: cancer, dementia, depression, mental, behavioral. Look at our kids. They are all crazy. Really.
True. I'd also.
Sad. So you see them, they go to kindergarten. I'm sorry, Kevin. They go to kindergarten and they get them to have a nice slice of bread full of gluten. Then they put a nice big thick of peanut butter.
The classic food
then
pyramid.
it's covered with a nice layer of jam full of sugar, artificial colorant, flavor, you name it. Then they hand them a nice glass of milk full of hormones, antibiotic. Hello. They go home. They are crazy. Poor parents. They give them video to just shut them out. Just go there. And then guess what? Mom doesn't create food from scratch. What she does, open the cans, open the prepared bag of food, of potatoes and all that, full of plastic, non-stop. And they are wondering, now we are dealing with the treatment, which is wrong. We have to go back to the base and clean up from there. And hopefully soon we are going to get there.
Dr. Sarkis, you did say there was a list of foods that do make you happy. Is this like
yeah.
bonbons, or what's on this list here?
I will mail it to you.
All right.
Seriously.
Let's
So,
go ahead, Cindy, please. Yeah.
just real quick, what we can do with QEEG is identify where that source of depression is, because depression can also be a brain that's in fight or flight, or too much anxiety, too much fast wave activity, and it crashes, and then you can't motivate, and hormones start sinking, or it's a head injury and the networks are not operating optimally, and you can't muster, you don't have fuel and firepower, and that gets translated with a presenting symptom of depression. So there's a lot of ways that we can not only look at it and identify the source in the brain, but then target with neurotechnology to regulate that source.
Great. Yes, can you please talk about why microplastics end up in the brain more so than other organs, and maybe some possible ways to defend against that, and what you see as potential side effects from the proliferation of microplastics?
Yeah. I was shocked to read an article on autopsy of two patients that they passed away of the brain. They found microplastic, and I said, oh my God, plastic passed to the brain barrier. This is a thick barrier. How the heck can pass there? It did. And then to my surprise, they found microplastic in the blood, with all my respect, for men, semen, for women, ovaries, in the children's blood, is in our food. In my house, there's no plastic. As much as I can, I eliminate. But that's not the issue. The issue is also our garment, pajamas, the sheet where we sleep. Everything that we touch is plastic. You might say, where that plastic comes from? Unfortunately, these days they are grounding all the plastic and they are mixing it with the soil where they are producing our food, our vegetables, our fruits. Please go home and Google food that contains plastic. You will be shocked. Carrots, apple, pear, everything, A to Z. I give a handout to my patient and they tell me, Dr. Sarkis, what we can eat. I said, I don't know, maybe vegetables if you grow it in your own home. But even that, you go to Home Depot, you get these fertilizer, they are all mixed with the plastic. My patient, two of them, they found plastic in pen and plastic itself in the bag of fertilizer. And two of my patients, truly, I didn't believe them. They found plastic in their teeth when they were eating this Roman lettuce. I stopped that. What I buy, only organic and spring vegetable. And I remove it quickly from the plastic, put it in a paper bag, and then in a cloth or something in my refrigerator. But plastic is everywhere. They cannot throw it in the oceans because they are full. They cannot burn it. Where they can get rid of it? Soil. And unfortunately, sad to say, I truly believe they tried to make us sick. That's why all of us here, we have problem. We have problem with the joints, with the brain, with the memory, with the sleep, with mood. We are snapping to each other. We don't have that passion we used to have, patients used to have. It's all from inflammation. And it goes head to toe, from guts, starts actually from guts. We have leaky guts, and that's how it goes to the brain.
I did hear about something a while ago where these seahorses have an enzyme that naturally breaks down plastic. So maybe like through biomimicry, we can like reproduce this in the labs or something. I don't know.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
So, and then we got deep.
Well, yeah, we have one last question, everyone.
Hi, thanks for sharing your expertise. So I have two questions. One is this does this galactic 3, does it focus on cleaning up the cerebrospinal fluid? Is that how it functions? That's my first question. And second question is that I had a bad car accident 6.5 years ago, and I had a traumatic brain injury. I couldn't talk for 3 months afterwards. And Nick probably doesn't know this, but I couldn't walk for like a year straight. So what sort of insights can you give around things that are maybe not, in the right place anymore that I could work on? Because I only feel like I'm back to 25% of where I was before. So Thank you.
Sure. Well, galactin-3 is a protein that is naturally produced in our body. It's very good protein, actually. It regulates the cell growth and helps us with regulation of inflammation. But due to our environment, it just gets out of regulation of how it should be, how much should be produced. They found it in the blood, in the urine for sure. And in the brain, they could not calculate it because brain is solid, obviously. I have no idea if they will be seen also in in the spine fluid. I will not be surprised because if it's in a semen, in the blood flows everywhere. It should be there too. But this is all new. This is all new. Nobody really went. It will be very nice if someone goes and gets some of that spinal fluid, analyze it. But if they found it everywhere, it will be there too. What it does when it's out of control, causes inflammation of microglia. Chronic inflammation causes neurodegeneration. So the plaque starts to form and the brain gets hardened and atrophies. And, those tau proteins or beta amyloids that they are all somehow reproduces or by aging or as a reaction of our brain to environment, intoxications or whatever, galactin-3 shown to go this medication, which is anti-galactin-3. It shows that it goes after those and destroy them. That's why people start to remember things, act like normal, walk, talk, in Parkinson's disease.
We're going to wrap it up here, but I do want to end with the brain mapping. On average, when people come and see you for brain mapping, on average, how many sessions before you start seeing a difference?
Good question. 20 sessions is standard, but if there are two levels of training required, like people have trauma and head injury, that could be up to 30 or 40. Every brain is different. It depends, like with trauma and the fight or flight mechanism getting locked on. If people have had a history of meditation, I've seen over the years that starts to untie that mechanism. So it's standard is 20. We do it in sets of 10, a brain map after 5, and then another brain map after 10 to track the progress. And then we, after 10 is when we start talking about noticing changes in daily life. And 20 sessions is again standard, but if there is a head injury, it could take 30 to 40. And I do want to answer you real quickly. I would also offer you a free brain map if you would like to come in and we could do a QEEG and take a look to see what networks might not be optimally functioning.
Nick, close us out.
Yeah, well, round of applause for these guys. Wonderful job this evening. And the zombie community always wants to be helpful. So maybe we could take 30 to 40 seconds for each of you to plug a website or something where we can connect further. Kevin, please.
Please connect at kevinblakely.com. I offer a corporate assessment to see what your creativity levels are at right now, where they're struggling, where we can improve, and then I can make a tailored custom workshop for you guys to figure out how we can optimize this and really go forward. So that's once again kevinblakely.com, or just talk to me after and I can get you guys hooked up with it.
I will give you my website. Actually, my email address is a gentle touch at, no, I have many. Front desk at mygentlemed.com. But I will be very happy to give you my business card I brought for all of you. And John is also representing Metaverse that is specifically deal with True Binding Company. If you want to have more information,
John,
he
can you
will
raise your
also help you to, yes.
That's John right there, everyone.
And yes, Eric is our very handsome, with his beautiful wife. They came all the way from Colorado to support us tomorrow. For 3 days, we will have a convention in San Francisco talking about True Binding Company and TB 006. But we are going to be here. We will help you with any question you have. Thank you for your attention.
Cindy.
Hi, you can find my information on Jyzen, JYZEN.com. And by going there, you can see all of the medical and neurotechnology that we offer, the functional medicine, the peptides, the IVs, and you can read all about the NeuroFit section that talks about brain.
Where's
maps.
Jyzen located? What city?
It's in Mill Valley on the water. It's gorgeous.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you all so much. Do want to give a shout out again to Necodex. That's NECODEX. If you need any assistance building or designing products. And also come hang with us on the 10th of February. You think the aliens are real? Do you think this is?
You know, the guy that's coming in, he has communicated with a far off planet. So,
and he built a telescope.
Yeah, and we're going to have his telescope here as well.
For more of the best brands, be sure to check out siliconzombies.com. And until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other. Thanks so much, everybody.
I like the name. So you can go and we can get in touch, whatever, but yeah, we're going to develop a medical food, all natural. It's called a medical food by the FDA. We have to call it. It's not a supplement, it's not a pharmaceutical. It's in between. So you know, like, Lucina, Ensure, Pedialyte, those are the things. So yeah, it's all natural. We have 4 packets, 2 of the natural. It is meant to be used in conjunction with an antidepressant under a doctor's supervision, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to Yeah, go to the website, we explain it, and you can actually order the product yourself. We're sorry to consumer on our So the company was founded by a licensed psychiatrist and psychopharmacologist. He's been doing this for over 30 years. And it's not just him, but many researchers around the world have studied. And most, 1 in 5 people suffer from depression. And these are not statistics that we came up with, the World Health Organization. So what we have found, and what has been found, is that people have unmet nutritional conditions. So by taking, people don't talk about that. No, they don't. So we have 3 substances, all natural. SAMI, S-adenosinophiamine, is there. If you go on a website, it kind of explains it all. But you get that your question is how do you determine something?